welcome to So Lounge. Today I am working with McCall's R11039, which is also labeled as McCall's 8220. There's a difference between the envelope and the actual pattern pieces. And today I'm going to show you how you can change up your design options with the pattern and also add length. So Lounge is the place to learn to sew one pattern at a time. Be sure to click like and subscribe to my channel so you never miss a stitch. And if you've got questions, leave them in the comments below this video and I will get back to you. Now, the thing that I really like about this pattern is that there are 2 different length variations and 3 sleeve variations, all within the same 2 pattern pieces. So it's easy to sew. It is one of the beginner type patterns, and added bonus, you do not have to cut so many pattern pieces. So it's basically the front of the shirt, the back of the shirt, and then there is the front facing for the inner facing, and then the neck facing. So it's 4 pieces. It's quick to get cut out, and hopefully it'll be pretty quick to sew. Now, this is a dolman type sleeve, which means that the sleeve and the body of the shirt are all connected together. And we're going to look at the different sleeve lengths in combination with the bodice lengths to kind of mix up the design a little bit so we don't have to make it exactly the way that the pattern has it laid out. Let's go in for a closer look. So as you can see, the actual pattern instructions are also labeled M8220. I do not know why the pattern envelope is labeled differently with this R number. So I'm going to be referring to M8220 because that is what I'm going to keep seeing on the instructions and on the actual pattern pieces. Now, when we look at the line drawings for this shirt, it basically gives us 3 options. So you have the cropped version or the waist length version with the medium length sleeve. You have the waist length version with the long sleeve that is then gathered, or you have version C, which is longer. You can tell it has 5 buttons instead of the 4 buttons, and then it has these little short kind of stumpy sleeves. Now, when we look at the back, it's pretty much the exact same information. One thing to note is that the back sleeve is not cut on the fold. You are going to be sewing it together, so there will be a center back seam, but basically each drawing corresponds with these top drawings. Now, I don't think this is an attractive sleeve. I want to make C because I want to make the longer version of this top, but I would like to make it with kind of the medium length sleeve. If you look at the illustration on the front, I think that looks prettier. It's a little bit more flowy than this little short kind of sleeve. Now, I don't want to go into the whole long sleeve version because that's entirely too much work, but I like the way that the A sleeve looks better than the sleeve, but I like the C length better than the A length. Now, it's not hard to switch these things up because we can go over to, let me zoom out, our pattern, and when we actually cut it out, and I have cut this out in my size, which is a large, you can cut out all the various sleeve variations. Let me pull that out of there. So I did not cut any, I just cut the sleeve. This would be if I was cutting it on B, it's the longest version. The length for view A would be here, and I can just fold it back on that line. And then if I wanted A, it would be here. So you can see there's a significant difference in the size of the sleeve and the width of the sleeve between A and C. And I think A would just be more attractive. I just think it's going to be a prettier sleeve. But when we come down to the length, you can see that the A and B length is here, and then the C length is much longer than those, and it's actually going to be about, looks like it's about 2.5 inches longer than the A and B version, which is what I would prefer. Now, to change up this pattern, it's very simple. All you do is cut. So you just cut it wherever you want. I left this in for the purposes of demonstration, but I'm going to go with sleeve A. And so I'm just going to cut along sleeve A. I am going to save the other piece of my pattern in case I want to remake this at some point in the future and make it with a long sleeve. So I'm just going to cut that off, and I'm just going to save this piece. Now, because I'm cutting that off, I need to cut off the corresponding part on the back of the sleeve. So that is here. And I'm just going to cut to the A line. You can see it says cut to A. And I'm just going to cut this across here so that we know both of our sleeves match up. And that's how you would modify this. If you wanted to make the A version with the C-length sleeve, so that would be the little shorter sleeve, you can just do that. It's very easy to just cut what you don't want and keep what you want. And because it's the same 2 pattern pieces for everything, it makes it really, really easy to change up the design to exactly what you want. So you may be thinking, okay, Tony, that's great. I can do the A sleeve with the C length, or the C sleeve with the B length. However you want to do it, it's not a problem because it's very easy with these 2 pattern pieces. But let's say that you're looking at this going, I'm looking at the picture on the model, I'm looking at the drawing, I don't really know if that's long enough. Do I want a little bit longer top? And when you lengthen a pattern, there are lines on the pattern that tell you where you can lengthen or shorten the pattern. Now, this pattern does not have that, but it does have a nice straight line at a right angle to the center front and the center back that we can use the same way we would use a line that actually was put into the pattern to lengthen and shorten. Now, the benefit of this is I want a longer top, and this is an easy way to just add a little bit of length. Now, you may be wondering, how do I know what the finished length of this is going to be once I put it all together, put in the hem, and attach the facing to the neck hole? How do I know this? And it's very simple. We're going to go back to the pattern envelope and go in for a closer look, and I'll show you where to find that information. When you flip over to the back of the pattern envelope, you want to scroll down to the part where it says finished garment measurements. Now, this is where you can find a lot of good information, including what the finished bust is going to be and the width of the top. So it's going to be, I'm making it large, so it's not going to be that big. It's going to be 47.5. That means that this is going to be a pretty loose, flowy top. And then if I keep going down, I can see that for A and B, the length from the base of my neck to the bottom edge of the shirt would be 18 inches. And for C, it would be 21. Now you may be wondering, how do I know where the base of my neck is? And here's the good news. This is a really easy point to find on your body. And this measurement is standard across all the commercial patterns. So whenever they say base of your neck, it means the same point. So you don't have to stress about that. Once you know where it is, you're going to be good to go. The base of your neck is going to be the large vertebrae that is kind of here right between your shoulders. So if you just use your hands, you can feel this point right here where it's kind of a big vertebrae, and then you can kind of feel like it curves up towards your neck. So that is where you want to measure from. So I've got my tape measure, and I put a piece of tape at the 21-inch mark, so I know exactly where it's going to be. I can feel around while I'm showing you how to do this from behind. And if we get the tape measure lined up, where's that? There it is, with the vertebrae on the back of our neck, and then you can pull the tape measure straight, and I'm going to stand up straight, and then this is the 21-inch mark. So it's going to hit right here, kind of at the very top edge of this pocket, which I do not love where that location is. I would like it to be a little bit longer, so it kind of hits me right in the middle of my butt, across my pockets, and I just think that would be more flattering for me personally. So I am going to add 2 inches, so that's going to be to the 23-inch mark, which would be about right here, standing up straight, and I like that a lot better. So once you figure out if you like the length on the actual pattern and the finished length of whatever you're making, whether it's a shirt or a jacket or a dress, because you're going to use that same measuring point for everything. So once you kind of get a feel for it, you can kind of see like, okay, do I like this length? Then you can make a determination if you want to add extra length. So I want to add extra length, and I'm going to show you how to do that. It is going to be the same method that you could use on any pattern where you want to add the length. So let's go in for a closer view, and I'm going to show you how to do this. Before we go in for a closer view, I meant to tell you that you need to have some certain supplies to assist with this process. So you need some scissors that you cut paper with, not scissors that you cut fabric with. You do not want to dull your fabric scissors by cutting them with paper. So grab some of those. You're going to need some tape. You need a pencil with a sharp point. Now, I like to use mechanical pencils or ticky pencils, whatever you call them, and because they follow the ruler really easily and they give you a nice sharp line. Other options are a ruler. This is a Dritz see-through ruler. These can be a little pricey at Joann's, so be on the lookout for a coupon and buy one like that. It has all of these notches in it for different lengths, different markings. So there's a 1/4 inch marking, there's an inch marking. What else do we have? 1/2 inch, 5/8. 3/4. So there's a lot of different markings, and you can just line it up in these little grooves. So that also makes that easy. If you don't want to spend the money on that, any kind of a ruler would work. I happen to have a T-square that is just to make sure that I'm lined up at a right angle. If you measure carefully, you can still be lined up at the right angle. And then I also have this kind of a T-square. So last thing you're going to need is some paper. You can use any kind of paper you want. I like to use newsprint paper because that's just, it's an easy paper to find. It's cheap. It comes in these really big rolls, and you can get it at art supply stores fairly inexpensively. It's a good thing to just have on hand if you want to make your own patterns, or if you want to add length or make any kind of pattern adjustments to anything. So once you have your supplies all together and you're ready to go, let's go in for a closer look. So I have my pattern piece here. This is actually the back pattern piece. It just happens to be the one I grabbed, and I put my piece of paper underneath it just so it's easier to see with all the lines, because when it's just on the cutting mat, it is very hard to see what we are doing specifically. So first things first, I am going to cut off this bottom edge along this line. Now this is the same line we would cut if we were reducing the length for views B and C. So if you want the short length, obviously you want it shorter, so you're not going to add any length to it. But if you want to add length, this is the line we are going to cut on to add the additional length. And this is pretty similar to the same way we would cut a pattern, which specifically stated like cut here to add length. So it's the same method, which is why I'm showing you how to do it this way. So just finish cutting that on that line. And then once you have your two pieces, you want to get the top piece all lined up. And if you have a cutting mat, you can use the edge of the cutting mat to line up the front. Let me zoom out a little bit so you can see a little bit. There we go. So I have my piece of paper lined up on one of these lines of the cutting mat. So I've got all lined up. I can line up the front of my pattern piece with that piece of line to make sure that everything is staying at the right angle, which is actually a right angle, because we want that front to stay square to the hem. And I am just going to add a piece of tape to hold this all together. Then we're going to just move down to the other side, smooth out the paper behind it. You do not have to cut the paper exactly the same, and we want to make sure that this stays at the same length. Actually, at this point, it doesn't matter because we're just going to be taping. We want to get everything secure, and then we're going to go in and measure across the bottom and make sure that it's even. So, okay, so now we've got our pattern taped to our additional paper, and now we can go in and add the additional length. So I want to do 2 inches, and see how to do this. Okay, so I'm just going to line this up. And if you're using like this kind of a Dritz see-through ruler, because it's square, you know that that's a right angle, and that makes this a little bit easier to keep everything lined up. So I am going to line up the edge of my ruler with the edge of the paper and this line that is marked on my cutting mat. If you do not have a cutting mat, you can still line up everything at a right angle. Just make sure you're using the piece of the paper that you didn't tear, or so that you know it's square. So I'm going to then go in at the 2-inch mark. I'm going to mark it right here. And then I'm going to follow along that front edge and mark another 2 inches here. I'm going to go down to the very, very end and mark 2 inches. I'm also going to go in and just draw this edge here so that it all lines up. And that way when we add the length, we know it's all going to be in the right place. So you can go back in with a straight edge and make sure that everything is lined up. You can see that my paper is not even with the actual line on the mat, so I'm just going to even that out. And I'm going to come over here and get this all lined up. Finish drawing that line, and it's even over here as well. So you can see that the bottom of my paper was not even, but now we are good. So once you have the lines marked, you can go back in and draw that line so that we know where to place the other part of our pattern piece. I'm just going to flip this over and get this lined up on this side. Making sure that it's all in the right place. There we go. And then I'm going to draw a line underneath there. And everything is all lined up. And now I'm going to come back in and attach my pattern piece back to this line with the extra 2 inches added and some tape. So I'm just going to line up this edge here at the right angle like we had done before. I'm going to make sure that the line of my pattern is against the line we drew in, which we made sure was at a right angle. And now I'm going to just finish measuring. I'm going to finish taping. I'm going to hold that down. There we go. Making sure that everything is lined up, and I did not tape this straight. It's a good thing about tape, you can just pull it off. So there we go. Okay, so it's all lined up. I'm going to finish putting in some tape. And once that is finished, then we're going to move on to the front panel and repeat the whole process. Now you can go around and trim out the paper on the back if you want and tape that as well. That will make it a little bit easier to cut. And let me show you how to do that. So just flip over our pattern piece. You can see how the paper is rolling because it's been in that tube entirely too long. So I'm just going to cut off the bottom down here. Make sure you do not accidentally cut your pattern piece. You might want to put your finger in there to make sure you don't have any problems. And then I'm going to go back in here and just tape this down so that everything just lies smooth once we go in and pin it to the fabric and get that whole part lined up. And we'll repeat the exact same process on the top here. And see where it's taped. I'm just going to fold it over. Cut that paper. get everything lined up and lying nice and flat, and then I'm just going to tape this again from the underside. And hopefully this paper will stop fighting with me. And then over here on the side, we still have to come back. So now we've got our added piece. It's taped in there, and I've got to cut off this side panel over here so that all the side lines up nice and even. And that is how you add length to your pattern. Now, if you want to make sure that you are measuring everything correctly, you can go back in and draw the grain line and connect that all up. So you can just line up your ruler and then just draw that in so you can measure once you get everything on grain. And then we're going to repeat the exact same process on the front panel, because remember we started with the back panel. Once you have your extra 2 inches added to the front and back shirt pieces, you can always go give them a quick press to make them lie down. Mine are curving, which means they are not going to lie down super flat on the fabric once I lay it out. So I'm going to do that. And do not forget that you still need to add an additional 2 inches to the front facing. This is the piece that is going to go down the front of your shirt to add the finish, and then we're going to attach buttonholes to it and buttons on the other side. So you do need to add an additional 2 inches to that piece at the same line that you would have cut off. But we also need to make sure that we move the buttonhole into the right place. So let's go in for a closer look. So we are going to be cutting on this line for A and B, just the same as we did with the other pieces. But before we cut anything, we need to measure the distance from the base of the buttonhole up here. Let me turn this so I can see it a little bit better. So we need to measure this distance between these 2 buttonholes to make sure that we put the buttonhole on the correct part of our extension so that everything stays the same distance apart. Now I want to grab my hem gauge because that makes it a little bit easier to see exactly where I'm supposed to measure. And this is coming out, the space between these 2 buttonholes is 1 7/8 inches. So I have a scratch piece of paper over here. It's 1 7/8 inches, and that's how much I'm going to need to add it in. Now the buttonhole itself is going to be, let's see, looks like it's going to be 5/8 of an inch between the actual markings for the buttonhole. So I'm going to write 5/8 over here, and that's the buttonhole, and then this is the space between. So now that we know that information, we can cut off the bottom piece at the line for A and B, and then we're going to repeat the process of adding the 2 inches just like we did for the front and back panels. All right, so I've got my extra 2 inches of length added in to match the front panel of my shirt. And now I'm just going to draw the line for the buttonholes down the addition so that we have a line there to follow. Right place, there we go. So once we have that line, then we want to go to the bottom buttonhole up here, and put a piece of paper under there so you can see it a little bit better. Get a bigger piece of paper. There we go. Okay, so we want to measure from the bottom of this buttonhole to the new buttonhole mark, which was going to be 1 7/8 inches according to our little cheat sheet right here. So I put my hem gauge back to the 1 7/8 inch mark, and I'm just going to draw a little line across that, and that is on top of the tape, so just press hard if you are, it's not showing super well. And then the next measurement we had was 5/8 of an inch, so I'm going to move my hem gauge back to 5/8 of an inch, and then from that point I'm going to measure down, and that will be the bottom of the buttonhole. And so I'm just going to make these little legs a little bit longer. If you want to see, they're about, they're a little bit longer than 1/8 of an inch. So just make sure that they're the same size. And if I erase, this is all going to shake. So I'm just going to adjust them accordingly so that they are 1/8 of an inch. So I know how big to make the top bars on those buttonholes once I get to that point. Buttonholes are usually in odd numbers, but the shorter version of this just has 4 buttonholes. If you want to add a 6th buttonhole or leave it where it was, it should just be a tiny bit off because it was too, you can move it down again. That would put the buttonhole here. If we measure another 1 1/8 inches, and then from there it's just 5/8. So from that mark, it'll be 5/8. If you want to add, so you'll have a total of 6 buttonholes, you can do that. It's totally your choice. And then I'm going to go back in here and cross out the ones that I'm not going to use so I don't get confused. So you do not have to do this extra step. I don't think I'm going to add another button down here, so I'll have 6. I think 5's going to be enough, and just leave like a little tab on the front. That way my belt will show through. So that's how you add additional length to your pattern pieces. As I mentioned, this is the same method you would use to add length to any of your pattern pieces, and it's pretty straightforward once you kind of have an idea of what you're doing. So just make sure that you transfer any button markings if you are adding length to a shirt or a jacket, because you don't want to cut and then not have all that lined up. So the next step is going to be to lay out your pattern pieces according to the instructions, and you are ready to cut out. One thing to keep in mind, if you are going to be adding length to something, and you know that when you buy your pattern, make sure you get a little bit of extra fabric to accommodate that additional length. Sometimes pattern piece layouts are going to change a little bit once you add some additional length, but usually just adding an extra 1/4 of an inch, 1/4 of a yard to a 1/2 yard will provide you with enough fabric to make the adjustments that you need. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to click like and subscribe to my channel so you never miss a stitch. And if you've got questions, leave them in the comments below and I will get back to you. Until we meet again, happy sewing!